everyone, this is Heather. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I've got a card tutorial for you and we're going to be making this fun mushroom house for a little fairy. I wanted this card to look like it came out of a children's fairy tale book, and I thought watercoloring would be a really quick and easy way to color such a large image and to give it that nice soft look of being from a book. The background stamp is a brand new stamp from Hello Bluebird. This is their mushroom house, and they've got a lot of really great patterns and scenes in some of these larger stamps that have just been released. I love anything fairy tale, fairies, fantasy, so as soon as I saw this mushroom house, I had to get it, and it goes along so well with so many of their other stamp sets. These backgrounds measure approximately 6 by 6. So you can do a really large card like we're going to do today, or you can cut it into sections and just use part of the stamp. To go along with the house, I'm using a few stamps from the Fairy Garden with their coordinating dies, and also the fence from the Party on the Farm and its coordinating dies. To color my images today, I'm using the Arteza Real Brush pens. These are water-based pens, and you can use them either on their own or you can mix them with water for a watercolor look, which is what we're going to do today. I think one of the most challenging things about doing larger cards is, do I have an envelope that will fit? So that's kind of a good starting point. I picked up some envelopes at Michael's a while back. They probably still have them. These measure just a little over 5.5 by 5.5, so it will fit a 5.5 inch card. Your other alternative, if you have a scoring board or an envelope maker, you could just make your own envelopes in any size that you would like. For the card base, I have a dark red cardstock that's been cut to 11 by 5.5. And when I'm using water-based markers like these, I really love to use Bristol Smooth cardstock. It makes a huge difference. They really don't work terribly well on regular cardstock. You could also use the smoother side of a watercolor paper, but you will still have that kind of rough texture on it. So I really like the Bristol. For the background, I've got a piece cut to 5 1/4 by 7, and then I have another smaller piece to stamp the fairy and all the little accessories. Because these background stamps are so big, I'm really going to recommend using a stamping platform. It's just going to save you a lot of headaches. It's going to be a lot easier if you need to stamp or re-stamp. So I've placed it on the lid of my stamping platform. I kind of needed to work around the hinges. If you have a slightly larger platform, you won't have that problem. I've cut my Bristol cardstock to 5 1/4 by 7 so that it's a little bit bigger than where I'm going to stamp. That will give me some blank space up here to be able to hold on to it when we heat emboss. So I'm going to be heat embossing this image in a black detailed embossing powder. So I'm first adding my powder tool all over my cardstock just to hopefully get rid of any static. And then I'm going to use my Versamark ink pad to ink up the stamp. Make sure that you apply plenty of ink, but just in case it doesn't ink up really well with the stamp positioner, you can re-stamp it. I'm going to close the lid and push down really, really well. And now you can see why I've got that little extra at the top so that I don't accidentally smear that ink. I know you can't really see that I've stamped, but it's there. I've brought over my embossing tray and I'm going to pour on the black embossing powder. One reason I like to emboss on Bristol, because it is a smooth cardstock, sometimes inks won't be as dark or bold. And I also don't have to worry about the ink bleeding. So now I've got my heat gun and I'm going to go ahead and heat my embossing powder. And after I've heat set it, I just want to make sure that every section has been embossed. So I just kind of tilt it towards the light, make sure nothing looks like it's still grainy. So on my second piece of Bristol, I've done the exact same thing, heat embossed and blacked the fairy, the fence, one of the little bugs, and the flower multiple times. So these Arteza markers have a really soft, flexible brush to them. One of the only things I don't like about these is there's no name or number to the colors. There's just a color on the end of the marker. So I can't really tell you exactly which marker I'm using, but I am going to start off with the deepest, darkest red. And just like with most coloring, wherever I would like the color to be the deepest and the darkest is where I'm going to lay my marker down. So I'm going to go around the edge of the top of the mushroom house. Now carefully go around the little chimney, around the bottom of the polka dots. So definitely want the color to be a little bit heavier underneath. And you can be very loose with this because we're going to allow the water to kind of blend this out. But because these are really flexible, you want to try not to go outside the lines as much as possible. I wanted to use my water brush today, but for some reason it's being a little finicky and not very much water is coming out. So I'm just going to use it like a regular paintbrush. I have a couple of paintbrushes close by if I need them as well. So you can just dip the tip of your water brush in some water and just use it like a paintbrush. So as you can see, with just a damp amount of water on my bristles, I'm able to really pull that color out, and it'll be a little bit softer in some areas and darker where there's more marker. And then you can go in while the paper is still wet and add even more color in areas where you would like it a little bit darker. So you can just keep adding color, blending it out, adding more color. Try not to have your bristles have too much water on them. Just kind of want them to be damp. It'll be a little bit easier to control the color, and it also won't pill up the cardstock too much. The Bristol will take a decent amount of water, but you really don't want to soak it. Whenever you're switching colors, you want to dampen your bristles, and I just wipe it on a paper towel just to make sure that that's going to come out clean. In addition to the roof, I'm going to add a little bit of red around the windows and the edge of the door. Go in and carefully soften that up a little bit. So another tip, if you do go outside of the lines, kind of like I've done here on the door, I'm going in with my brush and it's clean water. I'm going to add a decent amount of water there and then take my paper towel and blot that. And that's going to help pick up some of that color. When you lay your other colors around it, it'll be really easy to kind of soften anywhere that you've gone over the lines. So I'm going to be using the same red for the dress of my little fairy and my little bug. I'm going to add a little bit of color and soften that out. So I did want to talk about these larger images maybe feeling a bit daunting to color. So one thing that really helps me when I feel like I've got a large area to color is to try and limit the amount of colors that I use and spread them out throughout the scene. Because when you look at something that's very detailed, you'd think, oh my gosh, I might need to add like 20 different colors to this. So that could make your images look really busy, maybe a little muddy, because you just have so much color going on. So I find if I use this red, I've got it kind of scattered around the scene. Same thing with this gray that I'm adding to the house. that I'm going to spread these colors around to other areas in the scene. So I feel like I'm not too overwhelmed with trying to choose all the different colors. And for me, I think it just really balances out the composition. It kind of helps the eye move around the scene to use the same colors sort of spread around. So I've laid that gray down on the main section of the house. I'm also going to do part of the chimney, just a little bit around these spots, just so they're not stark white, and a little underneath the house. And anytime that I've maybe accidentally pulled some of that red out, just added some extra water, kind of blend that back in. And if there's a little bit of overlap, it's not a big deal. Watercolor is sort of a loose medium, and it's not going to matter if you have a little bit of bleeding. So like I mentioned, I'm spreading the same color around the scene. So the same gray that I used on the bottom of the house, I'm using for the fairy's wings. There are a couple different browns in this set, so I'm using one of the darker browns for the fence, as well as the shutters, the window box, the door, and the very top of the chimney. For the door, I'm going to kind of concentrate that color down on one side. And you can see I'm just kind of coloring right over that red, so it doesn't really matter that some of that bled through. I've cleaned my brush, and I'm going to blend all that brown out. Be sure to blend it out on the fence as well. Want a little bit more shadow on the fence. I'm just going to go back in with that brown and add just a little bit more so it'll give it some more dimension. I almost forgot the rocks on the pathway leading up to the house, so I did those in the same gray. There's also sort of a rusty red brown color in this set as well. So I'm going to do the rocks next to the house and the little dirt path going up. So I'm just going to add some strokes there and just kind of follow that with the water brush. That'll give that nice look of a dirt path. Moving on to some of the grass and the greenery, I'm taking a sort of an army green and just sort of following along where the stamp is indicating clusters of grass, and just really loosely going around that. I'm going to do that along the border of the path, up on the hills, around the rocks. Go in with a little bit of water and just pull that color out. So it'll kind of stay darker in some sections and a lot lighter in others. I'm just going to continue on and just blend all this green out. And since grass isn't completely green, in order to give it a little bit of a realistic feel, I'm taking a darker yellow, just adding a few little streaks here and there. Then I'm going to take that same yellow and color in any flowers. Then on some of the leaves, I'm going to add just a little touch of yellow here and there. There's a lot of greenery, so I want to keep it pretty easy and loose to color in. So I want to go ahead and color in the separate flowers that I embossed. I'm going to take my water brush and blend all those out. I want to be sure to soften out all that yellow that I added in the grass. I'm going to use the same color on her hair, again just so that I'm using a similar color and scattering it around my scene. I'm going back to the army green that I was using in the grass, just like I did with the yellow. I'm just going to add small amounts on the greenery. There's a lot of greenery on this scene, so I'm just going to be kind of loose with it. If it goes over the edges, I'm not going to mind too much. Then I'm going in with a really bright green. Same thing, just add small little touches of it around the greenery. Then I'm going to take my damp brush and blend all those colors together on all of those leaves. So now we have kind of a nice mix of a yellowy green, and it gives a little bit more of a realistic look. I added a little bit of that same yellow inside the windows, and so I'm finished coloring my background scene. And then to finish off my fairy, I have a really light peach color in her skin, and then add just a little bit of a darker peach, give her a little bit of blush on her cheeks, and I can soften that down with my brush. So with my coloring finished, I've got the dies for all the little extra pieces that I've colored in. So I'm just going to tape my dies in place with some repositionable tape and run that through my die cutting machine. So my next step is to trim down my panel. I want it to fit on my card. So I'm going to take just a little bit off the left-hand side and some down the left-hand side. I want the width to be 4 1/4. Then I'm going to trim real close to the top. Then I'm going to trim some off the bottom, and I want the height of my panel to be 5 1/2. I've placed adhesive on the back, and now I'm going to line that up with the top and the bottom of my 5 1/2 inch card base. And then I'll leave just a little bit of red on either side. I've taken my scissors and just trimmed off a little bit of the fence, and I've placed foam tape on the back of all of my die cut pieces. I'm using a kind of a really tall foam tape. With such a busy background, I really wanted these images to stand up away from the backdrop so they would really stand out. So I'm going to place my fence in the scene, the little fairy sitting on the fence. I put her little bug friend over here. And then I just wanted to scatter some flowers around just to give it some added dimension. And here's our finished card. I absolutely love this background. I think it makes for such a fun and easy scene. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to check out my channel and subscribe. And I hope you have a very nice day. Bye.